Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today, we're going to go into something we've got a lot of requests for. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher with Varonis. This is Michael, my friend and security gremlin. And today, we, in response to a lot of requests about this cool networking tool, are going to be covering pfSense. Now, I don't know a lot about this topic, but fortunately for us, Michael does, because he set this up for our house and has gone through a lot of trouble understanding how it works and also what it's capable of. Now, initially, I didn't really understand what pfSense was for. So, Michael, what would you, for a beginner who's never heard of this before, what would you describe pfSense as being useful for?
In 2 words, enterprise, well, 3 words, I guess. Enterprise grade firewall is what it is. So I really see this useful for like 2 sets of people, and those are the main 2 sets of people that watch this show. For like pen testers, wannabe hackers, like ethical hackers of any sort, it's great for setting up a home lab test environment, because legitimately this is one of the 2 most commonly used firewalls out there. So it is going to create a very, very realistic environment that you can hack at will and not ever have to worry about like legal consequences, because it's your network. You have given yourself permission to hack it, right? And then on the flip side of that, it's great for basically companies of any size to really beef up their security, right? Like it's very friendly to set up on your home network, but I've heard of companies like all the way up to like, credit card companies using this firewall at their institution. So like this is a corporate level enterprise. Like when I say enterprise, I mean like Fortune 500 companies using this firewall. And to be completely clear, it's free and open source. So like, if you're small, medium-sized business, you're a sysadmin of any sort, you can use this to hopefully lock down your network.
We also, in a previous stream, talked about some of the top mistakes that businesses make, and we threw a lot of shade at businesses that make mistakes when it comes to configuring their router and setting it up. And a lot of them are just kind of going with the default stuff that they get from the internet service provider and not really modifying it any further. And this leaves them in a pretty vulnerable configuration. So really, when we're telling people that they need to beef up their security and we don't really have like a particular vendor we're recommending, this is a pretty good alternative for setting your stuff up more securely and taking a lot of the recommendations we've previously made for businesses who are making cybersecurity mistakes that could get them in trouble. So yeah, if you are working at a business that's maybe doing things wrong, this could be a viable suggestion for how to beef things up and maybe not have all the security cameras on a network that anybody who's accessing the shared internet, like a customer at a coffee shop, can log into without a password. Maybe you don't want that. So yeah, this is a really valuable thing for anyone. If you're concerned about maybe you're in a shared living situation and you have some IoT devices that you don't want other people messing with. If you are living, if you are in a public space, or if you're setting up a public space and you want to make sure that, things that are like maybe 3D printers are segmented. I know I've been to a hackerspace before where I was attending like a Hackaday meetup. It was super cool. I scanned the network. I'm like, Octoprint, what's that? And I log in and I see that, I can control all the 3D printers in this place from the free open Wi-Fi that anybody on the street can access. And those sorts of misconfigurations could be prevented by a VLAN or just by making sure that these are truly separate networks.
And I think just like the most important note, at least on like the small business or like home front, is the fact that anything at all above and beyond like your ISP provided like router is going to be like much more defensive or useful than like most people don't change their default credentials. Like, so just setting up your own firewall and just the inherent level of knowledge you get from just setting that up is going to set you leagues ahead of everyone else.
Now, this is not a project I have set up before. Typically, when I'm looking at like router or firewall stuff, I'm looking at like OpenWRT or stuff like that. So how would this compare to like an OpenWRT project?
Yeah, so this is BSD based. I think it's free BSD. I forget, like there's a difference between free and OpenBSD. Yeah. I forget which one. I think it's free BSD it's based on. But yeah, so it's a firewall based on free BSD. And since it's open source, there's no like licensing fees or anything like that. So if you are at a corporation or somewhere where you're like, hey, I want to increase our security, it's a very easy argument to make to your boss, because you can take a spare server. You can even set up pfSense as a virtual machine. I'll touch on that briefly later, but I mean, it's very popular to do that, especially just to try it out. But like, as we've experienced before, setting up network interfaces on a VM can be a nightmare sometimes. And also then you get like performance and overhead issues because you have that extra layer of VM that you're having to go through for all of the network traffic, right? So that's not necessarily something you always want to have in place. But my main point there is like, you can easily take this, and I'll show you the hardware now, actually.
Yeah.
Let me go there to my screen. And so this is the pfSense website. But so pfSense is run by like Netgate. Netgate is like the company that sells the hardware, and that's how they make money, and they maintain the project. But the project itself is open source, if that makes sense. So they do offer their own hardware, which you can buy. And I think this one's like low $100, and then they go up from there. And you certainly do that if you want, right? But
so this is what, like, we get a lot of people who are like, listen, I don't want to upload all this matrix code into a Raspberry Pi. Can I just buy one that's pre-configured for a thing?
Right.
Like, this is effectively for pfSense, like,
that's what you would do.
Question. It's like, you don't want to deal with any matrix code or flipping any switches, then like you can just get one and it'll be set up, and you can then go in and start messing with what you want, but you don't need to worry about trying to load it yourself or whatever.
Yeah, and so like my order of operations here would be, like, if you're at home, you just want to try it. If you're at a business and you have a very small IT budget, you can try it in a VM first, show off like, hey, this is why we should do this. And then once you're ready to actually get some dedicated hardware, sure, this stuff's nice. Like, it's going to be a little more expensive. But for like most people who are just running like a standard gigabit connection or something like that, what I actually recommend is something that Serve the Home recommended in their article, and that's this HP T620 Plus. Basically, it's an old thin client, and you'll find these all over the place. And in fact, I've got an example here on eBay, right? So like, this one's even more expensive. Like, this is $236, and that's purely because they're branding it for pfSense, right? But really, all you need is a computer. So you can get one of these for $144, and then you need a NIC or a network interface card. I recommend some 4-port gigabit one, like these, so like $20. So if you want to do completely DIY, build a little thin client, you can do that. Obviously, you could do a full like custom build, but none of that's necessary because this is very efficient. Like, you could run this, like all of these pfSense hardware, it's all like ARM processors, I think, through here. And then
could you run it on a Raspberry Pi?
So that is a very good question. Unfortunately, no, you cannot. Just because of the way ARM works. I mean, there's probably someone out there who has gotten the source code and modified it and compiled it to run on a Raspberry Pi. But with ARM, it's not like x86 like you would have with your Intel or other CPUs. AMD CPUs. It has to be really custom configured for that ARM processor and in that setup. So no, it doesn't run on a Raspberry Pi. But yeah, my point there is you don't need a lot of processing power. So like, this is like $200 for this firewall could probably pretty easily handle like 2 gigabit traffic and still do like full deep packet inspection and everything you would possibly want to do. And that's why I really stress that this is great for like pen testers and stuff like that, because what it would allow you to do is to see like the blue team side of things as well. So you can see, okay, not only was my attack successful, but how loud was my attack?
That's a good point. A lot of the stuff that we teach people about are really basic intro attacks, and some of the more sophisticated stuff really requires a better knowledge of how networking works and how to go kind of low and slow when it comes to not being detected. Now, if you're just attacking some coffee shop, odds are any sort of configuration they have is going to be baked in to whatever the internet service provider gave them. But if you're going after, if you're really doing pen testing against a business that has defenses, then you're going to need to be aware of what kind of signature you're creating when you're actually doing the attack. If you're firing off a bunch of alarm bells in the first, minute of your attack, you're probably going to get caught, or at the very least, you're going to cause your target to harden dramatically. So I would say that's a great way of making sure that something that you're accustomed to doing that's highly successful isn't also incredibly easy to detect, like mass deauthing or some of the other attacks we've shown before.
And I'll touch on that later when we actually dig into the pfSense stuff, but there's ways to detect things like ARP spoofing, because I know that's a very useful attack that we've demonstrated in previous live streams. And you mentioned a coffee shop, and oftentimes when you do go to coffee shops and stuff, like they'll have the captive portal and all that. Like, oftentimes, what's handling that behind the scenes is pfSense. It's either going to be pfSense or Ubiquiti equipment. Those are two very common pieces of platforms installed by, like if I were a coffee shop, I contact the local IT company. I had them come install it. Odds are they're going to install pfSense or Ubiquiti equipment, or they might install pfSense and then use like the Ubiquiti switches and access points and stuff like that. But yeah, so basically you gather your hardware, and then you can go, where are the downloads here? Download. Just go to pfSense and you're going to select your download. Architecture, AMD, a little confusing. It'll work on Intel CPUs as well. Basically 64-bit. And then you're going to need like a USB stick. I mean, I guess you could go really old school and do a CD image.
Well, you can use a ISO image in a virtual machine more easily too.
Right, that is true. Because I have not done the virtual machine setup. But yes, that is probably what that is more useful for. And if y'all do have interest, like we can show like the virtual machine setup, but that's not really what I was going to focus on today. So yeah, you just go and then you select serial or VGA, like whatever console access your system has. For me,
what? Oh, for it to provide an interface to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not really important. That's if like I was taking my laptop out to a server rack and plugging in and connecting to it, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a serial connection, whatever. Then you're just gonna download this. I have Etcher right here, and then you're gonna open up a program like Etcher and flash that over. So you'll select the image, you'll select the USB stick. That's the way I installed mine, is a USB stick. And then you just flash it over. Now, where do I have? I have my image right here. So this is our rat's nest of a network closet at our home, right? So
Michael's really into abstract cabling.
Yeah, I know. It's a dream of mine to get an actual proper rack and purify this. However, we're renting, so I have limited capabilities on what I can do. But generally, this is what you're going to do. So as you can see, I'm using one of the thin clients I recommended. So what you're going to do is plug in the USB stick, boot it up, and then you'll just have like a standard wizard pop up, and it's just going to ask you a couple of questions. Just stick with the defaults going all the way through. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I was thinking of it when you were talking, but like you were talking about how like defaults are normally insecure. And one of the points that the Netgate people make on a lot of their live streams is that if something is insecure by default, then they make the secure version the default, right? So one of the great things about as you're going through this wizard is if you just stick with defaults all the way through and then make a good password, you're done. Like for 99% of people, like if I was just a small business and I just wanted to, have a good firewall, like that's all I would have to do.
When it comes to firewalls, that I feel like setting everything to secure by default may cause issues.
No, yeah, certainly there are like you could target things a little better as a hacker or whatnot, right? But like it prevents everything from like being open to the internet. Like if I had like, I know it's very common for like cameras to get accidentally exposed to the internet, like security cameras, either by intentionally or unintentionally. But like all of that would be stopped by pfSense. It doesn't allow any ports to be open to the internet by default. But yeah, so in a setup like this is kind of what you might see in your house. So we have Ethernet wiring in the walls right here, and then we have our patch panels. So I have all my patch panels going into my switch. Unfortunately, this is not a managed switch. I didn't have a big budget for our setup, and that'll be important to note later if you want to set up VLANs. If you're going to do VLANs, it's important to have a managed switch, because that will allow you to say, okay, I want this particular interface on this switch to be on its own LAN, right? And then I have my pfSense build here. Like I said, plug in the memory stick, boot it up. If you have, with the BIOS, usually on those systems, you have to press something, a certain key to get the BIOS and choose the memory stick as the boot option. Because like normally when you buy this off eBay, it's going to come with like Windows 7 or something like that installed on it. So you need to look up, I think it was like...
Changing the boot order.
Yeah, it's like F6 or something like that. Yeah, so you change your boot order, go through the wizard. I didn't show it here because I have, a bunch of stickers and I didn't want to reveal my stuff. But you're going to have your network interface card, and that's got your 4 ports. It's really easy. By default, it should basically be able to detect what is LAN and what is WAN by detecting what has like gateway and internet access. So basically on the back, you're just going to take your modem, your ISP provided modem, and you're going to have Ethernet out from that, and you're going to plug that into the back of your pfSense build, and that's going to be your WAN 0. Then you'll have one Ethernet coming out from that going to your switch. It is important to have a switch. I don't know if this is fact, but at least in my experience in this setup, I wasn't able to just plug my laptop directly into one of the ports on the NIC on the back of the pfSense build. It had to go actually through a access point or a switch of some sort.
Interesting.
I don't know. That's probably something with the way it was handling packets or whatnot. But yeah, when I was plugging directly into it, it was not working. That's probably with like the way it's detecting the networks and whatnot. Like I probably could have configured that to work, but by default, if you're like just testing it, plug in the switch and then plug your laptop into the switch and it'll work. Like that would have saved me like 30 minutes of time when I was setting that up. Now, an important use case of the pfSense build like this that I really didn't touch on before is the ability to set up things like load balancing and failover. And so what I mean is, imagine like you're a pen tester, right? And you're hacking into a system, and maybe, you're doing it late at night because you're a night owl, right? And, oh darn, my ISP is doing its monthly midnight maintenance on the network, and my network goes down. I've screwed up my whole pen test now. Like, I've gotten halfway through the engagement or something like that. Or you can just imagine like you're in the middle of a meeting with a client or whatever reason, you might not want your internet to go down. What you can do with pfSense is you can install a second WAN, third WAN, infinite WANs, right? And I'll touch on how to do that later, but that would allow you to instantly switch over to those secondary WANs when your primary one failed.
So an actual scenario where we use this was we moved to an area with incredibly slow internet, and our options were satellite internet with incredible latency that wasn't able to handle, which was also capped at a certain amount of data. And then a landline, which was also terrible, but at least steady. And then cellular internet, which was intermittent, but generally faster than the other ones.
Right.
So what we had configured, basically we needed to upload videos, and that's actually the origin of why we originally didn't do these videos live, is because we were out in the middle of nowhere. And when we had to upload these videos, it was like an hour per gigabyte. And these videos would be like multiple gigabytes. Yeah. So we would have to upload them overnight. And if let's say the satellite internet cut out, or for some reason the cellular data went down because the tower was performing its nightly maintenance, or the other internet service provider went out for no reason, it would kill the upload, and we would wake up the next morning and we would not be able to potentially do a live stream because the data hadn't been uploaded so that our editor could stream it. Right. So like this was a nightmare for us. So if you're living in a rural area, or if you're going to live in a rural area that has internet problems, the only way you're going to approach like a normal seeming situation is if you have failover, and that's what we had to do. Yeah. So between those three sources, we were able to get like decent internet. By rural standards.
I was going to say, you're kind of touching on it there, but that would also incorporate elements of load balancing. And so what load balancing is, so normally, let's say I just have one WAN. It's 100 megabit, right? That's okay-ish, right? But let's say I'm downloading a file and using that full 100 megabit. You can't use the internet now, right? By incorporating load balancing, if I had, say, a 100 megabit connection and a 50 megabit connection, then say I'm streaming something that's taking up the full 100 megabit, you'd still be able to use that. All your packets would be going through that 50 megabit connection, right? Or better yet, if I'm doing something, like if I'm uploading to a certain site, like doing torrenting or something like that, which would allow multiple connections, then I could get an aggregated speed of 150 megabit. Even though technically I didn't have any connection faster than 100 megabit, right? So that's a very useful thing. And then obviously incorporated into that is inherent failover. So, and then also I'll show it when we actually get to pfSense, but like you can do it tiered too. So I can be like, okay, I have 2 gigabit connections and I want to combine those to give myself a 2 gigabit connection. But then if like those go down for some reason, like they're the same ISP, and that ISP, has a server rack fire or whatever, then I want it to fail over to the LTE network. And I don't want to use that LTE network normally because that's really expensive data, right? So it's never going to use that unless it has to fail over to it.
Right.
But yeah, so that's the basic setup. Once you get it all set up, you're going to go to 192.168.1.1. That's going to be your default. Now, obviously, that's a very popular IP address as far as like home networks. So when you do go there, what I might recommend doing, especially if you plan on making a VPN connection to another, like maybe your grandma's house or like a relative's house because you want to help provide some IT support for them, or you have an office that you're going into, I might recommend using a different IP set. So like, 192.168.55.1. And so when you go to this the first time, you're going to go through a wizard and basically just default, unless you do want to change something like that. That's where you would do that. Then also...
Wait, can we switch to my screen for a second? Because this is what happens when I try to go to pfSense.
Yes, so
Boom.
It is...
Why? Why does it hate it so much?
So it's a self-signed certificate. So generally Chrome and Firefox, unless like I think you've preloaded in that certificate or whatever, it's going to say that. So that is a good point. You have to click it, proceed to the one under that.
But an attacker could be intercepting my connection.
Yeah, there's ways to get around all that in the future. By default, the first time you log in, it's admin and pfSense. That has been changed. And when you go through the wizard this first time, it'll prompt you to change that. It's very, very important to set a very secure password here, right? Because this is the keys to the city, right? Like, if someone has admin access to this firewall, they could like seriously control everything that's going on your network, right?
All right, type it in.
Oh,
yeah, type it in. No. You were trying to friggin' type it into the main thing.
Oh, yeah.
Switch over your friggin' screen. I don't trust you anymore.
Okay.
All right, now you type here. Now you type it in. Admin, and stop.
Admin B. See, no, we're not the... Yeah. Oh, I can't see because of the glare.
Just don't hit tab again and type your password in plain text.
There we go.
All right, cool.
Okay. But yeah, so where was I? Yeah, I think I've covered... Sorry, I've been a little rambly about the actual setup process.
No, this is cool. So, like, we just needed to understand, like, what
Right.
this is for, how you do it. You stick it
Yeah.
on a USB stick, you get an old friggin' computer, you cram that in there, you
Yeah, and
change
then
the
you
boot
plug
order, and boom, you got this thing.
Yeah. After you do the boot order on it, remember, you're going to plug in your interfaces. It should auto-detect them, and then you can set up the interfaces in this.
Cool.
So this is kind of like the landing page. I've modified it slightly. Normally it would only be 2 columns. I've added 3. But this will be over here where you can see a lot of just system info, such as like what CPU you're using. Some important stuff to remember is like the memory usage, disk space, and such. Like, it's very minimal for me right now because I don't have a bunch of like, client inspection, like deep packet inspection. I'm not like saving PCAP files or anything like that actively right now. So the usage would obviously go up a lot. And so that's something you want to look out for, is if you know you're going to be doing those things, obviously you need to build a system with enough hardware headroom to allow for those sorts of things. But yeah, so if you do want to spoof up your pfSense build, oh wait, I'm on yours.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
I didn't think you could see what I was doing.
Yeah. So the first thing you're going to want to do, obviously the most important thing on here is, not advanced, general setup, scroll down to the bottom, click on your theme, and switch it to dark.
This is tiny. Enlarge it greatly for our audience. Audience, I'm sorry for your eyes.
Control P, Shift P.
No, just Command plus.
Command plus. It's not working.
You gotta do friggin' Shift. You're doing Command equals.
Shift plus.
Command. Also, you also press Command.
Shift Command plus.
You were doing Command equals.
Okay, there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Sorry, audience, for your eyeballs.
Yes, but now my joke. Whatever. I do like dark theme. It's a little easier on the eyes. But yeah, some of the stuff you're going to want to set up in the general setup is obviously your host name and domain. That'll be done during the wizard, but you can always change that. Maybe if you're setting up like your grandma's firewall or something, you might just change the host name to Firewall or something. Like, just think about who's going to be using this, and what name might be easier for them to understand. DNS.
Wait, go back up. What you're in general setup? All right, cool.
Yeah, general setup. So the DNS servers are going to be pretty important. I know a lot of people by default will be using their ISP provided DNS, and that can be a problem sometimes because a lot of times those ISPs will sell that data, telling everyone where you're going or where your users are going. So obviously I have Google on here, so I don't really care about that too much because I am giving Google that data. But primarily I'm sending it to Cloudflare, which is 1.1.1. They tend to have lower times. I know another popular one is 9.9. Quad 9 is a very popular one. The reason I have so many is actually because I have failover set up. And when you do have multiple WANs, you have to provide each WAN a unique DNS. So I can actually go here. Yeah, I think it's assignment.
Hey, cool. Okay, I'm going to do something right after you're done, but go on.
Yeah, what was I talking about? I was talking about WAN assignments. Yeah, so you can... Is it... I think it is... Is it routing? Yeah, so when you're making your gateways and your gateway groups and all that, you have to provide each one a unique DNS, because basically it's pinging that to check the status of that interface, or that WAN connection. So it wouldn't be able to tell whether it's that DNS server being down or if it's that connection itself being down, if that makes sense. So you need to provide it unique ones. I went ahead and it's very common for people to do like the same ones, but the different server addresses. So like 1.1.1, but then also 1.0.0.1, which are both Cloudflare DNS. I decided that's a little risky because if Cloudflare has been getting like denial of service attacks and stuff against like its DNS. So I went ahead and set it up with Google and Cloudflare just for extra redundancy.
One thing I recently learned I think you can also do is if you go into the networking stuff and go into DHCP server, you can also set up the DNS servers that you want clients to be using. Like
you can force that.
Yeah, which is really cool. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
So if you were a hacker, you could also potentially abuse this to insert DNS settings into clients. So if you had like a rogue DNS server and you were like a pen tester and you were using this for evil, it's kind of cool that not only can you set it for the router, you can also push that setting to clients as well.
Well, also I think that's an important point of why this is useful for pen testers. Or ethical hackers in general to learn is like, okay, there's a lot of focus on like getting access to the network, like particularly on our channel, but like what about once I get access to the network, right? Like if you can get access to the firewall, right? Like then, and you're familiar with this, you know your way around the network in the sense of like knowing your way around pfSense. So if they have a pfSense setup, like you know, you're the master of that town, as it were. But yeah, did you say you had something that you wanted to show?
Almost.
Okay. What was I going to say? I was going to say something about DNS before we got sidetracked on that. Yeah, I don't know how forceful the DNS is because I know like you can use DHCP to issue DNS. So like by default, that's what I have this doing is issuing the Google and Cloudflare DNS. But I think on each individual system as well, you can say, okay, hey, I don't want to use the DHCP provided DNS. I want to use Cloudflare, right? Because like that's something I don't think I've covered it on a live stream before, but setting up the Pi-hole. Did we do a Pi-hole live stream?
No, we did not.
Okay, but on like the Pi-hole, that's a DNS server, right?
We're actually usually not allowed to show the Pi-hole because everything every show that we do relies on ads, but not this one. So we actually probably could do this one.
So if you're not familiar, that's a Raspberry Pi that acts as a DNS server, and it blocks ads. It works as a network-wide DNS black hole, basically. So you give it a list of IPs that you don't want it to resolve, and it won't resolve those. So it can be a very powerful thing. You can do the same thing in pfSense, though, however, because pfSense has Unbound, which is choosing as its DNS resolver. And so you can just set a blacklist for that resolver and be like, hey, here's a list of known malicious sites. I know, the security community dumps on, blacklists a lot, but they are useful to some degree, right? So you can use that to block things, because that way, if something malicious does get on your network, it can't phone home if it happens to be on your blacklist, for example.
Okay, so one thing that I think is really funny is changing your MAC address to be terrifying. So let's go ahead and switch to my screen for a second.
Okay.
So people often say, hey, you've got a Mac computer, but on the network, it says it's a Dell, and also its MAC address is is of a Dell. Well, we can kick that up a notch also because the pfSense lets us do some MAC spoofing. So if you wanted to have a really scary computer that no one would ever want to see near them, you could always make it we can just go to a MAC address vendor, look up something scary, and in this case, DRS Tactical Systems, Inc., they make vertical launch systems for missiles. So if you see one close to you, you know that there's a vertical launch system that's training in on you.
Yeah.
Of course, we could also do Lockheed Martin, Ultra Electronics, Tactical Communication Systems.
Yeah, I think I would be more afraid of Lockheed Martin.
Yeah,
because it's also more recognizable.
Yeah, let's do Lockheed Martin. So there's lots of different websites you can go to look up vendors and stuff. You can also, I think the first one here can also generate one for you, which is cool. So here, just generate Macs, boom, random ones. But now if I go into pfSense in the interfaces section, I can pick any of these interfaces and I can basically spoof it. So I can just put this in here, and this is the beginning part of the MAC address of any Lockheed Martin Tactical Networks device. So if I just take one of these randomly generated MACs and take the last part of it and drop that in, I now have a valid MAC address for a Lockheed Martin tactical network device, and any nearby person who's scanning this, let's say that we want to scare hackers away from this device that's like connected to a coffee shop. Well, here's like a little way I could press save, and I'm not going to do that because it's going to change our network configuration.
I think that would technically be a safe thing to save, but I'm not going to risk it on the
live stream. It's probably fine. I'm just not going to save it. But I often get people who like can't believe that like a device they're seeing on a scan like isn't really what it says it is. I, as a hacker, love changing my network devices to say that there's stuff that they're not. So just another little layer of deception that if you want to throw people off your trail.
Security through obscurity is no security at all. But mindful, like if you want to have fun and like, so there's a double-edged sword there. Like realistically, I would avoid things like that simply on the like IT technical support, like helping people when things are intentionally mislabeled. It makes a nightmare of communication. Like imagine you're trying to tell like some small business, like, okay, I want you to connect to the vertical launch system, and they're like, wait, why? What? I don't understand.
No, Michael. I disagree on that. I think if you want to change the MAC address to spoof it to be whatever you want, it would not cause any technical problems because it's just a MAC address.
I'm not saying technical problems, but communication problems.
Okay, but it's not. You know, most of this stuff isn't going to be found by MAC address. It's like you have an IP address you associate with it. So like, I don't think it'll cause too many issues. And yes, this is not really security like. This is not something to do to enhance the security of the device. This is something to do to camouflage it on the network. Or what I would say is if I was someone who was going around just war driving and I'm looking for vulnerable network configurations, maybe I have an exploit for a particular type of networking device. Now I've changed the type of networking device that it says it is. It's not going to affect any of my local connections. But to an outsider, this network now looks very, very different from what it might look like if it was something, you know, where I know how to trick this device, or maybe I know the Wi-Fi of this configuration is vulnerable. It at least will cause some automatic detection to fail.
Yeah. Cool. I was going to say, one of the things I would definitely do first, though, realistically, is user manager, because you were kind of alluding to this. By default, the admin's the only user. One of the things I would do first, even for like a home network, is add a user. And so like, I'm just going to say Michael, and then I'm going to set, you know, password. But the reason I suggest that you set up another user is because a very common attack is, say, like, I'm in a restaurant, right? And I have permission to audit their network. One of the things I'm first going to do is, you know, scan for the router, and then on the router I can run a simple brute force attack, right, against the admin user. Now, what the value of setting up another user is that we can say, you know, create Michael, and then I make Michael an admin user. Then I log in as Michael and disable admin. So what that means is anyone that's trying to just do a simple like exploratory attack by brute forcing admin with the million most common passwords. It's gonna be a waste of their time because admin's not even enabled.
Yeah, getting rid of the default credentials is a really important thing for anything that's going to be connected to other people. So if anybody else has the opportunity to knock on the door, you want to make sure you don't have the default keys.
Yeah, exactly. Don't say that. But yeah, from there, what else?
It looks really easy to set up a VPN.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole like just a tab where if you have an open VPN, a commercial VPN that works with an open VPN account, or open VPN protocol, you can just add it like pretty simply here, which is really cool. Yeah. So that means, you know, if also you're worried about stuff that's coming out of your network being intercepted by your internet service provider, Michael touched on the fact that it's not illegal for them to capture your traffic and then sell it to whoever wants it. That's just data for them to have and eat, and they love it. So if you want to deny them that, which you absolutely should because it sucks and it should be illegal to burrow through someone's tech trash, then slap on a VPN. Like you are going to be trusting the VPN over your internet service provider, but your internet service provider makes money off of that data. The VPN makes money off of not abusing that data.
Well, and something like, I know this is a little more hardcore even than that, but you know, everyone recommends, get a VPN, you know, spend $5-10 a month, whatever. But, you always hear about VPNs, like, doing things they said they wouldn't do or whatever. You know who I trust most out of everyone in the world? Myself. And with pfSense, you can set up your own VPN, right? Literally for that $5 a month, you can go to Amazon Web Services or, another cloud hosting provider, buy a server for $5 a month and set up your own VPN to that.
So you trust Amazon.
Or right, mind you got to trust them to some degree.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with any internet or VPN service provider.
Yeah.
It's like if you're worried about them, if you're going to do a bunch of sketchy stuff that's going to get you in trouble, then you're just handing that evidence over to someone else. You don't know if they're logging or not. There's people you can go through and see like black marks against a lot of different VPNs where like maybe the data was used in a certain case that shows they do some logging. But if you're just the average person that doesn't want their stuff sold or aggregated by like commercial entities, then like a VPN is still a better choice than having no VPN. And if you're worried about people on your local network snooping on stuff, then it's another good thing to have on there as well.
And so just real quick, let's see if it's... Yeah. Something I try to communicate to people is that pfSense by itself is great. But what makes it amazing is all the add-ons you can add to it, right? All the additional stuff you can do. So if you go to the System and Packet Manager, I don't have any packages installed currently, but there's a whole list here of like pre-approved, like pre-certified stuff that you can do. And for example, earlier I alluded to the fact that I could monitor ARP messages or ARP packets, and be able to detect someone like Cody trying to do an ARP spoofing attack. So like I think in one of our previous live streams, we talked about ARP spoofing, and in fact, like it's what? Your computer's trying to tell the entire network, hey, actually I'm the router, you're going to send all your stuff to me. And so what ARPwatch would allow you to do is monitor all of those messages and set alarms if there's, a new router or something like that on the network. From what I understand, it can be a little annoying if you have it on a network, like a home Wi-Fi network, where you have a lot of new devices joining. Like, so if you have guests coming over all the time, then you're going to get all kinds of, like, messages. Oh, new devices joined, whatnot, right? But if you have a more static environment, this is great, because the second anything changes, you're going to know about it.
That's useful because most people have no idea when a new device joins their network.
Right.
And that's why if someone were to get access to it, they would probably be able to get away with staying connected for a very long time.
And literally all you have to do that is install and confirm. And, ta-da, it's going to be installed for me. And then I can configure that, and I should now... Yes, I think I should be able to see it on the installed packages. Yep. And then it's my first time using that one, so I don't know. But it would normally pop up here somewheres. I'm not going to dig into that because we're running out of time, and that would be like another live stream. But more of what I wanted to show off is just all these packages that you can use. Some of the other ones that I think are very valuable. Cellular. That allows you to actually put a cellular modem in your physical hardware build, and that way you can have the LTE failover built in. The way I have it set up on my network is I have like a MoFi device, which is upstairs, and then I have it Etherneted in. So it's provided a local IP address on the MoFi's network is going into my pfSense, and then I just... So the problem with that is technically it's going to be a little slower. Like if you look here on the main page and you're looking at the ping time, that's actually why the cellular network's a little slower. Or at least it's a contributing factor because it's going through that extra layer of networking. So if I were able to put it on my pfSense build, I'd be able to reduce that time.
So, okay, this all looks cool, but what about attacks? Like if I was doing that ARP spoofing attack, how would you actually see it? What would it look like?
Yeah, so we would have to go and do the setup for this, which
Is it extensive? Can we try it?
I have never done that before.
Let's take a look at it.
I don't even know how to open it.
Click on it.
Package dependencies.
So right now, with it just fresh out of the box, can it detect deauthing? Can it detect anything?
I'm sure it can, but I don't know how to. Because I know when I downloaded it.
Status.
Let's see, ARPwatch. Oh, here, ARPwatch. It's under services. Okay. So if I go to services ARPwatch, then I could set it up on whichever interface I want. So here I have WAN, which is our primary gigabit internet, and then I have WAN 2, which is our LTE for failover, and then LAN is obviously our local network. So I would need to customize this, I believe. Update.
Most of the defaults look okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then if I save that, go. Yeah. I think I have to assign. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look in. I didn't.
Did you select the? Well, I don't know. I'm just curious to see. So if you're like, I want to.
Oh,
watch
it's
this
not even
one.
enabled. Hold on. That's the problem. Enable. So yeah, once you add it, let's save. And then, yeah, so anytime you're modifying these settings, you basically have to save. And then sometimes when you save, there'll be like a pop-up right here, and then you'll have to save it again, because that's usually if it has to like reboot or something like that. So let's see if the...
While you're doing that, I'm going to switch over to mine for a sec, and I'm going to open up BetterCap.
Okay.
So I'm part of the network, and I want to trigger this by doing some ARP spoofing. So if I take a look at what I can run, I can see most of my network tools are not running yet. So I'm going to do net.probe and net.sniff. And then help.
Are you ASCII Computer Corp? No, that's someone else.
Okay, so sniffing around in the network, I see a bunch of stuff. I don't see the pfSense though, because it's on a different IP.
You're on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'm on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so that's on a separate network.
But that's okay, so it should still see it, right?
I think you should be able to see it.
All right, so I'm not ARP spoofing yet, but let's do it. So we'll do ARP.spoof on. And now
That actually may not be true because the way our Wi-Fi is set up, I think, because we're repurposing the ISP provided access point. So the ISP provided access point, I think, is actually doing its own subnet thing. So you would need to be on the same network. Does that make sense? That's why I was trying not to do that.
What you're telling me is your big fancy machine can't detect my ARP spoofing.
Well, if you were actually attacking the pfSense network, but you're not.
Right. So even though it's administrating this network,
no.
It's presiding over the Wi-Fi network.
What's actually happening on our network is I have my network. There's a whole house network, but then the Wi-Fi is creating its own network, and so like I'm its ISP.
Okay.
I think is what's actually going on with the way that access point is set up, because I didn't have the money to buy my own like ubiquity access points, so I just had to repurpose it.
Yeah, I'm ARP spoofing the crap out of this network.
Yeah, because on your screen you see how they're all 11.1 stuff.
Sure do.
That's because of the fact that access point is doing its own network.
Okay. Well, I guess we can't spot any attacks. That sucks. We probably could if we configured it differently, but
yeah, no, that's
I can do all sorts of attacks against this network. So
what you need to do is Ethernet in.
Yeah, but
if you Ethernet it in, then you would see it. But
okay,
you're on a different network. But yeah, so just kind of to wrap up real fast. There were some other packages that I wanted
Here.
to talk about. Darkstat can be useful for monitoring like which devices are using how much bandwidth. So particularly if you want to do more of the load balancing, and maybe you have a bandwidth hog, right? They're torrenting like 4K videos constantly or something like that. With load balancing and stuff like that, you would be able to say, okay, this device is got a limited bandwidth of 100 megabit, right? And they would never get faster speeds than 100 megabit, even though your entire system has, a gigabit available to it or something like that. You can also do other traffic shaping type things. So for example, what I could do is say, I want our live stream traffic to YouTube to be absolute top priority. It goes before any other traffic, right? You do have to be careful when you do things like that. Otherwise, you can starve other devices on the network for bandwidth, right? Like you can prioritize your bandwidth to such a degree that no one else on the network can access the internet. Let's see. I texted you some of the other ones that I wanted to show off.
Interesting.
Nmap. You like Nmap, right? There's actually, yes, here it is, Nmap. You can install directly onto pfSense. And obviously that's going to be very powerful since, you are the center of the network, right? There is pf blocker ng. That's what I was saying you would use as like as a black hole for particular networks. So if you know like a certain IP address, you want to ban it, like that's how you would implement that. And then also, I'm not going to cover it on this one, but Wireshark can be integrated into pfSense, or so I can stream packets from pfSense to Wireshark to look at, or I can go up here to diagnostics and I can do packet capture. I mean, I can do like all packets and just start a packet capture right now, or I can start filtering it by like I only want the IPv6 traffic, and let's see.
Oh wow, I can set promiscuous mode. That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, so then I would be able to capture packets. This is particularly useful if you're, troubleshooting problems or whatnot. But then also, like as I was saying earlier, if you are doing like pen testing and stuff and you want to maybe monitor what the target would be seeing on their network logs, like that would be a very great way to capture like all the packets, see what exactly they would be able to see in a very detailed manner. But
cool.
Yeah, we're running out of time. Sorry I didn't really dive deep into like the technical like tutorial how-to. I intended for this to be more of a general overview of the types of things that pfSense is capable of. And obviously there's a lot more that this can do. I'm really just basically a novice at this. But if y'all let us know some of the ideas, maybe things you would want to do with a system like this, then we can create some future live streams and do tutorials around those.
Whoa, okay, also, sorry. I just did a packet capture. It's awesome that it lets you just be able to see it right here, and it does resolution as well. So it'll attempt to resolve any IP addresses that are like actually in here. So these are local ones, but you can see that there's ARP requests going out. So actually you can see elements of the ARP spoofing that I'm doing in this packet capture because I put it into promiscuous mode and had it watching on the WLAN 2. Okay. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then you can download the capture, open it in Wireshark, and start to poke around at it, which I think is really, really cool. So seems like for people that just want to get started also monitoring network stuff and seeing how loud their attacks are, then this would be a good way.
Nmap might be a good option for that as well.
Under diagnostics and Nmap, then being able to do an Nmap scan on like 192.168.11.1, interface any, scan method to SYN, fine, whatever. No, not pinging. Yeah, we'll do the service scan. Yeah, so let's do a service scan on the router. And like...
Well, okay, so to clarify again, our access point is not set up in bridge mode. So bridge mode is what I would need to have set up, but the ISP provided router does not allow, or I shouldn't say router, access point does not allow bridge mode. So it's setting up its own network.
Whatever,
So,
bro. I failed the routing and switching class. All I know
Yeah.
is that I'm going to slap a 0/24 on this and run it and see what happens.
If you're doing that, should show nothing. I think you would need.
192.168.
Oh wait, no, yeah, that should do this network,
I
right?
know how to do a network scan,
Yeah,
but it is going.
we'll see
very
who
slow.
at the house is actually Ethernetted in.
Yeah, it's going to be like you.
It's gonna be this laptop and maybe like one of my roommates.
Hey, ugh, it's going so slow. I'm distressed. Whatever. I guess it's just doing an Nmap scan. These are slow anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, I think if it ever finishes, we can go back to yours.
Yeah. I think that's like the majority of the sorts of things I wanted to show off. Like, it's like talking about Kali Linux, right? There's so many different things you could do with this. Like, I don't even know what all to cover. But I think I've really covered some of the high points. So, like I was saying, if y'all have ideas what y'all want to see more of, I can set that up. Because, like, today, I know our one little live demo went a little haywire because I didn't set up this environment really for this, and I have limited capability because this is actually what we're streaming with right now. So there was a little bit limited on what I could actually do on the network that we're currently connected to. But I can set up a better test environment, with spare PC on its own network and whatnot, and then we will be able to play around with that a lot more.
I'm so mad about this slow Nmap scan. But yeah, aside from that, I think this is a really cool way of seeing what it looks like on the other side of a firewall. There's tons of options. Most of them are intuitively labeled, and you can pretty much figure out what they're supposed to be for. But if you know a little bit about what each one of these protocols really does, then it's a lot easier to get started working with the options. So you can kind of start with wherever you're most familiar and work with those settings, and then explore to see some of the other ones. Some of the defensive ones I think are a really good way to understand like where you're leaving trails and what you might want to change. And I still think it's hilarious to change your MAC address and identify your device as something other than a pfSense device. Oh, look at that. It finally finished the Nmap
Oh,
scan.
do you want to show that?
I don't even care anymore. It's just itself within your computer.
Yeah. Well, you had it scanning a bunch of stuff, and then
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much all we got today. If you guys were interested in this and you want to see more about pfSense, there's lots of different ways we could take this project. We could have it being configuring a VPN. We could have it sniffing traffic. We can have it doing all sorts of stuff,
Yeah.
maybe bringing the traffic into Wireshark and watching stuff in real time. That could be cool. Just let us know what you're interested in.
Yeah, I think that the next thing I would cover on pfSense is setting it up with Wireshark, so we can do all that packet capture directly routed to or to Wireshark. Then also I could set up our access point in bridge mode. I think maybe if I can find a way to brute force that, so that way it would actually be on the same network. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it would be fun to start setting up some monitoring tools and then seeing which attacks are actually detected and which ones aren't. So let us know what you guys think. We always appreciate comments and suggestions for any upcoming shows. You can reach me on Twitter at Cody Kinsey, and of course at Michael's legal name, _Hoyd. And yeah, also if you like this, you can check out some of the other great free Varonis resources. We highly recommend some of the new attack labs as well as the AD PowerShell workshop. They're really great ways to check out how attackers actually go after companies and what you can do about it, as well as getting started with scripting in Active Directory.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.